Gonna have to figure out how to get that thing back on after it exploded.
No. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Oracles of Theleston. We've got a very special one on. As you can see in the upper left, we have a couple special visitors here, and don't mind the picture of my chair. My webcam has derped, so
Derp.
so there we go. All right. So, we're going to be talking about the Synod today. As you can see, Diggs is here, Pole's here. Zero is around, but he isn't unfortunately able to join for today's show. Otherwise, you would have seen the rare 5-screen display going on. But yeah, this is an interesting subject. There's been a lot of talk about this synod, considering they're kind of like one of the main driving forces in the game and the world, and how people have like gotten organized and everything. You know, it's kind of been a big, huge. I don't even want to call it an elephant in the room. It is the elephant that is the room, but
Right, right.
we haven't really sat down and talked about it in full detail yet. So this is that chance. Everybody in chat, if you've got questions, most definitely jot them down, send them out throughout the show here, because we want to get everybody's questions and opinions and things that you want to understand about the synod, because, like I said, it's kind of
It's a
important
big deal.
and it's a lot to
It
know.
was a big deal.
Yep.
I think before we really get started, one thing we should probably articulate clear is that the synod itself isn't there isn't a hall of the synod necessarily. If there is, it's the hall they met in. It's not.
Right. The Synod
Is
isn't
not
a
a.
group. It's like
It
the
was a happening.
it's like the New Deal in American politics, right? It's
Yeah, it
or the
sort of was.
Reconstruction.
Or
if you
the
want a
Reconstruction,
slightly more
really.
loaded analogy, right?
Sure, because it isn't. The Reconstruction wasn't one group of people. It was a dude. Well, the president had the idea, brought it to his council. The council then was like, okay. And in this case, it wasn't even one dude. It was a couple people were like, I think maybe, and a couple other people somewhere far away were like, I think maybe.
Yeah, I can
And-
get on board with that.
And then as they met each other, they came together with the idea that we should probably, begin again. We should probably start over and mark a day, because your calendar is different from his calendar is different from his. And we're all kind of getting together finally after this long period. So let's make a new calendar. Let's figure out what our rules are going to kind of be about, civility and how we go forth. Let's put a line between what's okay gods and what's not okay gods. And really it had to do with the elder gods, but we can get more detail later. And then they had a gathering. And that is what the synod was. The synod was the gathering wherein all the people made their kind of foothold in the.
Kind of a signing of the Constitution moment.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to put it. Though the Constitution was really a one calendar, one sort of. Can we all sort of get together and start living and not fighting against individual darknesses? Can we start rebuilding what Theleston used to be according to these legends that we have from so long ago? And
Right,
then
but
thereafter, everyone broke off. And
it
went
seems
back
to me, that you have used the way you've used the term in the past. There's a Synodian calendar, so there
True.
seems to be a Synodian pantheon.
Well,
That's a fair comment.
I guess there is, but the Synodian pantheon is the elder gods of Theleston versus the great old ones and the outers, and the kind of upstart, or what they weren't sure lied on which part at the time. It was kind of figuring that out. What is an elder god? Do we all
Right.
remember these guys? Yeah, okay, well, these guys are the guys we back, the ones from our world, so to speak. So it was
Right.
a gap of followers of the elder gods in opposition to the other gods that had come.
Well, so we're going to get into that, I think, but it
Yeah.
seems like there were people discovered, and it can't just be. I mean, well, from the way you've you've told the history so far, it seems as though all the people who were left to be even available to go to the synod all worshipped the elders. So I guess we would want to hear, and this is part of some of our questions, is who wasn't invited if they had gods that the gatherers of the synod did not want those gods included, and who got excluded when peoples got there and were like, yeah, no, we think you actually follow somebody we don't want to follow. No thanks, we made a mistake, go back home. And then I think it's so a real quick question is the Kongarai gods are elder gods?
Certainly, they are.
Okay.
Absolutely. So there were I don't know if delegates is the right word. There were followers of Bast at the synod. There were followers of Beth Kalor at the synod, though that's probably a whole story's worth of fun interaction. Though I had put in my notes way back at the beginning of Revival when I was writing out the Pantheon, I divided my Pantheon document into Elder, Great Elder, or etc. Elder, Gu, OG, and had starred all of the Pantheon gods that were at the synod, and they were basically, if you were an elder, you were allowed in. You were allowed a space to talk. So, even some of what people might think of as back in the Revival days, red or blue gods, because we had to do that mechanically. In my story, they're all gray, right? That's kind of how that stuff works out. But when you're making a game with a numeric representation of your goodness or evilness, you need to kind of tag gods in one way or the other. And so my thought was that even the red gods were allowed a delegation, were allowed a place to come and say, this is what we think, as long as they were actually elder. And so there were probably, what were turned away were things like Hydra cults, Dagon cults, followers of the many-mouthed eater in the darkness, things that the people that were already there at Skypass didn't think were elder. But if an animal-headed god showed up and was like, I'm a representative of this faith, and they had that in their books, and then they knew, that's an elder god, we know, they would let them in.
So they used the Broggian library?
Yeah. Well, and the people that were already there. Do you know these gods?
So is that a core component of why it happened at Skypass? Because there were records that were kept?
Correct, yes. That was where they had written record. So they knew where to go look for people because they had a map. And when they found those people, they'd be like, you remember us?
They also had probably the best intel on the various gods, right?
Well, the most collated knowledge, the most collated written, in one spot.
That's what I mean, yeah.
So there could be someone somewhere who knows something about a god that isn't written in the Broggian library, but only until a Broggian meets that guy.
Right, no, of course. More importantly, though, they would be able to tell when a cult wasn't a cult of what they thought they were, because of aspects of their worship.
In
right?
some cases, sure, yeah, but that's only about how astute the actual scholar looking at the people were. You could probably, if you had no idea.
Yeah, it's a diversion.
That you were channeling
I was just
a power of like Azathoth, but you thought you were a Hoenn follower.
I was just interested in how many crypto cults made it into the Synod.
It is very likely that at least one. I dropped my pen.
Here's kind of a question with all of this. If the Broggian scholars are the ones that their data was relied on heavily for making a lot of these decisions, was there even the possibility, let alone the act of bias going on among the Broggians, or is it the sort of thing that if you write something that's incorrect, that's like a sin against Brog, and you now have to repent or whatever and do something to correct it?
So sort of both are true. So on the one hand, I'm sure that there was some amount of bias, though that bias would broaden as the different delegations came in from around the continent, because now you had a wider base to discuss.
Yeah, it becomes a composite. Yeah,
and you become more.
The concept that there's a focus on the written being Trump is not only biased, it's supremacist, because there would be other people around. I mean, writing isn't the only form of maintaining records and
Right.
knowing who
Well,
is who,
that's
especially in a
absolutely
world of magic. So there's
The-
inherent bias.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thankfully, like kind of what I was saying is like once the Falkirk got up there, now the Falkirk don't have written language, but they do keep an oral history, an oral tradition. So once they were there, they could add their wisdom, and that would help to be relied on. The one issue with the magic is that the Brogans won't use magic to look into your soul. They don't use magic. It's against their
But other people's do. If you're coming together to form some kind of concept of working together, it can't just be one
way.
group who maintains it. There's got to be some compromise.
It's
So
either
that's fair.
lobbying heavily for a ban on magic everywhere and losing, for
And
example.
yeah, well, yes. Part of the reason they chose Skypass also is that the ley lines tend to go around the place, so that it is overall geographically less magical. So, and they chose that as a safety measure when they originally did, because things were nuts.
When the Abbey was built.
When the Abbey was
Right.
built.
Yeah,
Certainly.
make sure no goo or Ogs are showing up. So yeah,
Yep, that
Like,
makes sense.
So yes, and I do think that they would. So I'm sure that along the way, on the way to Skypass, people were absolutely employing their magical traits to point fingers at people one way or the other. And I think that the roots of the great old ones' reachings, probably went sort of far, and that it didn't help the opinion that outside of certain places of where people lived, it was sketchy, because you go out there and now there was this whole sort of bubbling foment of, are you a cultist, or are you one of the elders, or do you follow the elders, right? And so the roads, I would imagine, even got a little more hostile during the time of
The
gathering,
Yeah.
before it was
It's a
put
panic,
down,
right?
yeah.
It's Salem. It's the Inquisition. It's
certainly
right.
Now,
it's a subtle inquisition, because it isn't that there was a force marching around going you.
Well,
It was more
not
like there were
any
many little
one
forces.
force. Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It was I'm certain that the beginning of the gathering and the idea that there would be a coalition, I guess, at least for a moment, or a coming together of the followers of the elder gods, caused an increase in unrest, discontent.
Well, yeah, knowing some of the legends like I do, I mean, it's. I don't want to spoil stories that we get to tell, but I know damn well that if you were a peasant in what would be year one after the synod was signed and all that,
Sure.
you wouldn't go where a bunch of people were gathering. You're just asking for effing trouble.
Oh, as a peasant, like a person with nothing to offer?
Right. Well, I don't even mean it's a good thing they're gathering there. I mean, hundreds of people are going up to Skypass? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no, you would tend your potato patch or your corn
Right,
patch.
and you wait to hear about the inevitable panic or madness or infestation or murder that was going to happen after all of these people had congregated in one place for too long.
Probably would expect some sort of conflict, a war, a fight, But that depends on how broad your scope of understanding of what the world, what was going on. So you'd be tending your potato patch, and you'd see 100 men on horseback ride by.
The kings had all died.
Yes.
And they had all died in the
Right,
days
so
the kings all died.
Right.
Right?
But-
This is a bad idea from that perspective.
I agree.
So that's my question. Can you have peasants where there are no kings? Wouldn't it be more commoner than peasant?
Yeah, they
Yes.
would think of themselves as peasants only because they hadn't changed yet.
Yeah, they don't have to pay a tithe necessarily,
Right.
though they might to
There-
their church or
There
their local
was a
organization.
time in the region that is now the Blackwell Archipelago where there were kings and there were feudal lords and there were peasants.
Right. Those were
At
all
this point, that's like 1,000 years ago.
correct. Those were all dismantled by
Yeah.
various
Right,
forces.
but in year zero, some of those deaths were relatively recent.
Yeah, sure. Within 100 years.
Yeah.
Certainly. And so these are just people doing their thing, Willow, once he gets out of the veil,
Right. Yeah.
and he's standing next to the crow cage, and what the hell are all these horses doing? Out of the way! Pick!
So, anybody? I have a question. If nobody else does.
Actually, there's a little bit in the timeline. So we kind of look at year zero, year one, or whatever, and things going forward from there. And I apologize for my webcam having derped out there. I tried to make a slight adjustment, and it's proving to me that it is time to be replaced.
No.
But it's kind of the time, basically from the start of the fall to the formation of the Synod. It doesn't seem like it happened overnight.
Certainly not.
So I guess it's so yeah. That's the thing. So the start of the fall of civilization. You're saying it started like approximately what year before the Common Era?
Maybe.
Oh, I would. The beginning of the fall.
Yeah.
I would give that 1,500 years.
Yeah.
Maybe. I would give that a long stretch of time.
So
because
okay, so there was a lot
they-
of history then before that fall. Like the world had been around and developed for a while.
Well, there's like probably millennia of history before the start of the fall,
right.
right? And I think the start of the fall, as Omboy is saying, is like 1,500 years before the Synod.
Correct. Yeah. There is a lot of history, and the fall was long, slow tumble into complete disorganization.
It doesn't become, kaiju walking the surface until towards the end, but
Right.
it took it started way before that.
Certainly. Well, with the slow trickling in of these external forces and people learning about them and using them a little at a time and then using them a lot at a time, and then causing massive shifts on both spiritual planes as well as on
Resculpting reality.
right. It changed the world in a horrible way. It's devastating.
Okay, so then I guess kind of towards the end of that, the towards the end of the fall, between then and when did the Synod actually start to form? Was it like, well, shit's not as crazy, let's try to rebuild, or was there a period of time before they realized, well, maybe we can actually start, doing things and not living in the darkness alone together?
Yeah, that was kind of my question too. So, like, what was the situation where people developed the sense that maybe it's not just us, maybe we can go out and find other people? I mean, there should have had to have become a point in time where SkyPass is doing fairly well, and well off, that they can start wondering if there's other people who survived as well, and maybe they should. So I think the question we're both wondering is like, how much time before that idea gelled, and then them thinking, yeah, let's go out and gather some lost people.
Maybe 100 years, maybe two even, maybe 150-ish, maybe
How many-
even 50. But
how many-
probably 2 generations where there weren't things regularly making obvious fingers to the elder gods, right? So how long after you actually see Dagon himself fording the ocean do you go, well, I wonder if that fish died? I wonder if he's asleep.
Yeah, maybe he went somewhere else.
Maybe he went away.
Right.
And they're a retreat, so all of their word came from sending people. Go see, go look, come back and tell us. Oh, brother Milbar didn't come back.
How many tries before it took?
Well, exactly. Yeah. How many times did Brother Milbar not come back?
Right.
Or, and I get the feeling, the sense that while we don't have any god that would like necessarily just show up to his follower and go, Tim, it's time to go north. Instead they give them signs or like suggest via
reoccurring dream.
Right? But then they're not going to be like, you got to go find the Brogine. They got beards. They wear robes. Go find those dudes. It's time, But I think that the elder gods, being that they are kind of united in their dislike of the others, as they kind of cyclically gained more power, probably inspired in the different individual peoples that follow them an idea that you can do this. Maybe you should go purge the
So my perspective,
the great old ones.
My perspective is that the war isn't being fought by men; it's being fought by gods. Right. Humanity is just, we're their guns, we're their. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I played a lot of Populous.
We're their tools. You know what I mean? The real war happens above us, and I figure you're only going to let your tools go fallow for so long before you're like, hey, it's time to dust that shit off and get going. Pardon the language. But, it's...
Gods can swear.
Yeah, but yeah, no, my thought is really that, the Synod happened mainly because, maybe the elders were like, we could probably push everybody off, but it's going to take a lot of effing work from you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe they set aside their fun time squabble over this piece of Theleston in order to get their game plan back.
To forge a new weapon, so to speak.
I can even imagine that they inspired the individual pulling into closed hermetic civilizations for a few hundred years to kind of
you mean the guy
get your shit back together.
You mean the monk that was like, I'm gonna go build an abbey in the mountains, F this.
Yes,
probably was inspired, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
I could buy that.
And well, his inspiration, actually, because that guy was a Brogine, his inspiration was probably, I'm reading books about where the great old ones don't like it. Right. I'm reading books about where it's hard to live, and I'm reading books about how to live there. And my knowledge of geography says that I think we could probably build a permanent walled abbey in this place. And the great old ones won't come because it's too cold, and bandits won't come because it's too much of a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And maybe I can keep my books there.
Yeah.
And I won't have to put out another abbey fire.
Like you said, the Aether's light there.
And the Aether, right. Well, and a Brogine would respect that because he would be like, at least no one's going to be turning into other creatures or summoning things or, because the Aether is so light and thin. I imagine that the
thin. That's the word.
I imagine that the mountains there, the bulwark, like splits the Aether, like it moves like wind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
it's just my imagination.
It does. I mean, that's literally how we modeled it.
I know. It's in the mechanical, absolutely.
So somebody decided to build an abbey in Sky Pass, and a culture sprung up around there. And so, are you saying that at some point the idea came to go in search of other people who worship Brog? And was it just Brog? Which gods were worshipped in Sky Pass at the time when they decided to leave in search of other survivors?
It was primarily a Brogine abbey, primarily, but they knew that they were friends with the followers of Hylati and Denna back in history. They knew that these were peoples they got along with, so they were on the roster for maybe we should go find those people. Tide's End was a mix of all sorts of faiths. It was just it's a stew pot. So they were like, Tide's End, well, that place is still there, I'm sure. We can get there. We can see what's going on there.
Had people forgotten about Sky Pass at that point?
Some people never knew about it. Some people wouldn't know. I mean, there are a handful of castles in the world.
Yeah.
You've never heard of.
That's
no reason to know about.
Castles in Austria you wouldn't know were there until you came around the corner on the highway.
And there was, right.
Well, that's actually something that I was wondering about, was in terms of like we've seen maps and we've seen like where some of the reestablished places are, but we have no idea. Like I don't know that there's been anything. Maybe you've got a map in the works that you haven't talked about at all. But kind of the pre-fall, like 1,500, 2,000 years ago,
right.
Where are all of the cities and all the places that got rolled over by the gods?
Right.
Old world maps are artifacts.
Yes, old world maps are artifacts. Specifically, they were intended to be artifacts in Revival. You would find an old world map because that unlocks a world of adventure for you. Because now you know of locations that no other player knew about, and we had a whole system built around that. I mean,
there are regions of Greyshore, Anacotha too, probably. But
yes.
Greyshore are the one that I remember
absolutely
most specifically, where the terrain isn't the terrain. the terrain is ruins covered in dirt.
Yeah, it's what used to be something else.
Right, but nobody knows.
I mean,
you know,
to go back to what the meow was, the majority, like the outstanding bulk of the questing content was historical reconstruction, was archaeology, finding the ruins, finding the lost powers,
and all the
and
cool
then
shit
what
that
happens,
goes with that, of course,
right?
But yeah,
when you uncover, the weapons that destroyed the world, or the pieces, the things, the ideas that led to ultimately both the heights of civilization and the fall of civilization. It was both things, and how does that affect, the world? And then on top of that, that creamy layer of, just role play interaction of day-to-day life. What do you do in today's Theleston? So the people that were bringing both the magic back and the turmoil potentially back were the adventurers going out and questing and all of this. And all of their quest hooks were, I found this in a book, I read this map, somebody told me about this thing, or someone else chasing the tale of history has unleashed this horror, and now I will find it. So you had kind of the people playing in history, which were bringing the action, and the people who were just living the day-to-day, who were the action. And that was kind of this, that was really the bulk of the content.
One of my favorite aspects of the story is that the noble goals of the Synod are also the exact same things that are ultimately going to cause the destruction of Theleston if they're not careful. Right? Like there's this whole, well, wait, I think if we come together and we build everything back the way it was, everything will be fine. Only back the way it was is why you're in this. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
That makes sense.
Well, yeah, and it's the path between the two, right? It's the whole sort of, is it more noble to stockpile the weapons of mass destruction in a locked place where we don't use those because they're dangerous, or is it more noble to try to just destroy those things? And when you have those things, are you the good guy because you have those things, or
or does it start changing the
or
way
does
you
it
think
start
about
changing
how
the way
you
you think
solve
about
problems,
the world, or
right?
how you solve problems, right? And it's a philosophical exploration in it,
Yeah.
I guess the interesting thing about what you just said to me is that you didn't mention what I was expecting, which was that you're gathering. But this is gathering in order to bring things back to the way they were, or gathering to, what was it? Gathering to bring back things the way they were, or gathering to destroy those things. But I was thinking it was primarily gathering to try and prevent the rise of the
That's
goo,
true.
or the return of the goo and
That's
the
actually,
Hodge.
that's actually
No matter
broad
what way you did it.
Sure,
Like,
Sure,
the
that's
idea.
how the Brogans spin it. They're sequestering these things because some of these things are too powerful to destroy. Some of these things you don't know if destroying them
we
is
don't even
going to cause
understand
some other
them. Yeah,
thing, or we
right.
don't understand them. So the Brogans absolutely spin it as, we're hiding these things away and keeping them safe, and we would never use them.
Right.
So
On the other hand, there are some Nudensian orders that literally don't think the world is safe until you destroy all of these things.
all of the things of the great, well, the goo or of the OGs.
Right. And there are also esoteric scholarly orders who believe that if we can understand these things, we can turn them against the monsters that came here and finally drive them away for good. Like, the point isn't that it inevitably leads one to the other. The point is, based on the choices that the players make, that's going to decide whether the world is saved, destroyed, or something in between.
Right.
And that was, to me, what was always really cool about the way the world was set up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it wasn't preordained. We didn't have a story arc that at the end of 6 months we were going to turn up the neck. I mean, we had a story arc, but you guys got to drive where it went.
Yeah, the way we were building stories, it was more about, these are the goals the organizations and powers in the world have. These are the things they'll try to do to make them happen, and these are the way things will change based on input, right? And so rather than having a fixed narrative, it was more like, well, these 4 agendas are at play, and one of them is probably going to succeed.
Yeah.
So here's something. You guys kind of hinted at something that maybe this is a cyclical thing. Maybe every 2,000 to 5,000 years, some gods, cause some upstart. The world gets destroyed, and the people try to rebuild with the help of the gods. Because you're saying this has happened before, and it could happen again. And I'm wondering to myself, well, what about before the fall happened?
Well,
Was there previously a fall that occurred and a rebuilding?
Before.
Exactly.
well, but it seems to me that that the bulk of the millennia is the elder gods, right? And then at some point, the great old ones and the outer gods took focus in a way that didn't happen, I think, previously. It doesn't seem to be like a cyclical thing of every 2.5 thousand years. It seems like there was millennia for civilization to develop without this interference from the great old ones. Kind of like if you would think of almost if, well, I don't know, but almost if you would think of some of the Lovecraftian stuff, it's like, you know, there became a point in time when all of a sudden there was a focus where there necessarily hadn't been before. And so we might, now that we are on their radar, or now that Theleston is on the radar, then we can expect that at some point.
Right. Yeah.
Once those greater gods or great old ones or whatever regain power, they will refocus or may refocus, and that's going to be a problem again. Is the way I was looking at it, but.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, regardless of the cyclical nature of history that may or may not exist, I'm not going to answer that one. But regardless of that, it's definitely true that something changed. Something was massively different, and you know, what we call the arrival of the old ones is definitely that event.
Yeah. Well, and I think there are different kinds of great old ones. Some of them were probably drawn by somebody who had learned how or learned of them,
Yeah,
probably
or by
brought
other
here,
powers, yeah.
or by other powers, right? And I believe that the outers, and listen to me, I believe, the outer gods, I think, are always present. So kind of liminally present. They're part of reality.
Yeah,
But-
I was going to say calling them gods is more like struggling to define what they are.
Right. So with outers, it's if somebody discovers them or discovers how to interact with them, that's the crack, that's the leak, wherein they can begin to get here and do things. And the greater the magic's done to interact with them, probably the wider that fissure becomes. Whereas great old ones are chaotic in a different way, in that they're like, some come from space, some come from other dimensions, some come from the Hall of Doors themselves, you know, that sort of thing, and probably from something beyond the Hall of Doors. We've toyed with some of the great old ones are probably gods of other worlds than Theleston, wherein the other world has been destroyed, and now they are free floating and needed a place to go. Maybe someone found a doorway to that other world in the Hall of Doors, opened it up, and they were at the door. So now they're loose, and so they came. So that's kind of the different shades of difference there. And yeah, I would think that it was millennia with just the elder gods, because every planet's got its own elder gods, whatever they are, unless maybe there's a godless planet out there. That's its own truth.
Well,
right?
screw those guys.
Earth.
That's its own truth. But you know, so yeah, I believe. Yeah, I think you're right, Diggs. I think there was millennia of the elder gods' ascendancy, because this is their world. They are the forces of this world and of the people of this
Yeah,
world.
they're literally fundamental to its creation.
Right. Whereas the other things come from other places and are maybe not supposed to be here. So
Gotcha.
that's how I saw it. And it's the presence of those things and their growing in power in the world that ultimately brought us to, you know, to being completely fractured.
So, something I meant to ask earlier. Just like in general, taking the fastest known paths at the time when this stuff was going on, like how long would it take people to get their representatives or messengers from their city to Sky Pass? Are we talking like you know,
You laugh.
the scale of the scale of California is the size of this world, the scale of Australia, New Zealand is the scale of
It's about Texas.
Grayshore
Texas?
is about Texas.
Yeah, all of Grayshore is, and I mean just the landmass, is a little bit larger, I think, about 100, is it 100,000 or 50,000 square miles bigger than Texas?
Yeah.
It's 380 odd thousand square miles.
Okay. So it would be like, 2 days of, reasonably fast travel, and you'd probably be able to get everyone around where they need to.
Yeah, moving
Crowns
moving
Rock,
like
traveling-
speed, it's not that fast, but
I calculated a route from Crowns Rock to Sky Pass, it's vice versa. It's Sky Pass to Crowns Rock, and it came out to, as my notes say, 12 days of solid travel on good roads between Sky Pass and Tide's End. 1 day to get a berth in town, doing stuff. So that's just wheeling and dealing and getting yourself a
to
spot
get
on a
foot
boat.
passage, right? Yeah.
Then 2 days fast or 4 days slow travel between Tide's End and Crowns Rock. So a fast mover all the way through where everything went
Okay.
right. 14 to 16
That's what I
days.
have written down, was that it
Okay.
was about 2 weeks.
Yep. And then if you're crawling, 18 to 20 days.
But if you're
Well,
like,
if you're running a caravan, or you're
Right,
part of a
that's slow.
caravan,
That's
you need
slow.
to figure, like 2 weeks.
yeah, if you're pony expressing it or trading horses at every place that you can trade horses, you could make that route significantly.
You could
faster.
probably pair that. I agree. Yeah, these were just common expected travel
Yeah.
rates.
Part of the issue is also terrain, right? The Sky Pass is not easy travel.
No, it's very steep and long stretches of rock.
Well, and so the way this is spun to me, I interpret all of this. It all sounds supremacist to me. So I have problems with the way I hear the spin and with the this focus on writing and on maps, and we have gods like Hoenn. I would like to hear of followers of Hoenn that are not from Sky Pass who have faster ways of travel that people from Sky Pass might not be expecting. Maybe maybe followers of Hoenn don't have to rely on written maps in order to know how to get around. I don't hear things like that from other cultures. It all seems to be focused on a kind of European worldview of written language being the epitome of culture, and written maps being the epitome of culture, instead of there being other ways of knowing. So when you ask a question like how long would it take to travel, I would hope that a culture that's focused on Brog might do everything over land and not rely on more magical means, whereas other people who are followers of Hoenn might have other ways of travel that the Broggians aren't necessarily expecting, which might all fall apart once they get to Sky Pass, since there's no ley lines there. But that's the type of stuff that I hope to hear when I learn about different cultures.
Yeah. So,
I see.
for example, the dude who's running from the Fetchers
Yes.
does not move through town the way other people move through town.
No, he used
He even stops to make an offering.
yeah, no, he used the Hall of Doors.
Yeah.
That's
If
what
you
that guy
follow
did.
Owen,
Sure, though knowledge of the Hall of Doors is not super common, even amongst followers.
no,
of
of
Hoenn.
course not. I'm just saying, if you do, the Hall of Doors is not. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like a nirvana in a way,
Certainly.
right?
Yeah. Somebody who knew about it and had the blessing of Hoenn would use it fairly commonly. That's just rare. As all I'm saying is, it's not a widely known.
It's not join the club and you can use the flu network. Yeah,
Right.
I get it.
Yeah. And there is
So you could, if you're coming, say, from Valor, you could be a planeswalker and planeswalk to outside of Sky Pass and then walk in, having joined a caravan or looking
Right.
like you did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Though again, planeswalkers are highly regarded. That would be. I mean, if they were to tell people that they were planeswalkers, and the people that they told were not against the idea of using such grand magic.
Yeah, maybe not at Sky
They
Pass,
would.
though.
They would be. But in Valor, they would be highly regarded. A planeswalker.
Sure.
Wow, that's skilled. It's a powerful manifestation of the magic.
Yeah, but I'm saying maybe it's not even Planeswalker or Hall of Doors. Maybe that's just followers of Hoenn get in easier because they worship that god. They get, you know, their
Their
modes of
axles
travel
break.
are just easier. They don't have as many impediments.
Oh,
you know,
that's certainly true. At least
Unless
that's
The leagues just seem to follow.
Warkoth happens to.
You know.
yeah. The thing with
Catholic.
a follower of Hoenn would probably, like especially a devout that had the actual blessing of Hoenn, their wheels would break less, their axles would turn more smoothly, and they would find fewer potholes. That would happen. That's absolutely how that works for them.
At the extreme, would you care where you were going?
You mean if you were like a pilgrim of Hoenn?
Yeah.
No, a pilgrim of Hoenn walks, wears a wheel, goes where they go.
Right.
Why would you walk and wear a wheel?
You mean because the wheel is a symbol that I wrote
You mean
down?
why wouldn't you roll?
Why wouldn't you roll
Yeah,
around?
why you worship a wheel, but you don't
Sure,
use
maybe
a wheel.
Okay, sure. Maybe you'd have a chariot
It's a
or a
fair
horse
point.
or a wagon, whatever. You would travel as you wanted to travel. In fact, you know what I
Okay,
did?
I'm just saying that's
The reason I said walked, honestly, is because in my mind, I would think that the mindset of a just completely, I am a Hoenn guy. I go from place to place and just tell
Yeah.
people that Hoenn's awesome.
The path is going to
I think
reveal
they would
itself.
walk so that their vehicle would not determine their path.
Right.
So that they would end up in a swain riding with the
That's it.
hay for a while, and then would maybe through a chance meeting at a stop end up on a pony with another group.
See, that's funny. I think of followers of Hoenn more like Dirk Gently.
Oh, okay.
You know,
The
that guy
holistic
looks like
nature
Oh
of
my
the
God.
universe.
Okay,
that guy looks
so
like knows where he's going. I'm going to follow him. Right?
Sure.
that's
obvious.
kind of
Someplace
weird
important.
because I'm watching the TV show and I understand the TV show is not like the books.
I haven't seen
Yeah, I
the new
haven't
show
seen
yet.
the new one.
haven't
I've
seen
seen
the
the,
new show
the
yet.
other previous attempts to make it a show, but I haven't seen the new one.
Yep. I have read the
So-
books though,
I
so
totally
could.
forgot there even
Yeah.
was a actually.
I think we now have two brands of a Hoenn worshiper there, but certainly there is an extreme of a devout to Hoenn that would just drift. Talking about how everything is provided for them because
Well, the trick, like, jokes aside, the point at that extreme devotion is to take the opportunities as they're being presented to you, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not to drift aimlessly, but rather to, at every moment, evaluate the choices that are being given to you and make them.
Yeah.
Right?
And the
so,
way open in front
step
of you.
through the open door, not just, I'll wander around and maybe I'll find a door. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
you'd have people that did
It's
that.
every second
too.
the door, figure out how to get through it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think you'd have
That's
both of
interesting.
those
We
guys.
need to. I think we need to focus back on the Synod, but it does bring up an interesting thing to me, connected with watching. It's Dirk Gently. Is that the name of it? Dirk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he seems to get to where he's going without purposefully following a path. So yeah, it seems like even somebody who was going, a follower of Hoenn, who was traveling to Sky Pass to make it to the Synod, might not be relying on a map, and
Certainly not. In fact, might just wind up at Sky Pass and go, "Oh, I'm here. What's
Yeah.
going on, guys?" And they're like, "Oh, we're doing this thing.
Yeah.
Who are you about?" And he's like, "I'm about Hoenn." And they go, "Right on. Have a seat."
Yeah.
I can see that happening. That's a
Yeah.
cool story.
Yeah.
Cool story.
So we have these people, followers of Brog, in Sky Pass. They know that there were followers of Hylety and Deno. So they're leaving, hoping to find primarily these three civilizations, or just do they have a set number of elder gods that they're followers that they're hoping to find?
No, I think it
And
was
do
more.
they know where they might be?
They have an idea where the old centers of civilization were, up in Fall Creek, down at Tide's End, out in the deserts of the Gorai Plains. They have an idea that those are deserts, though they also know that they used to not be. So they were going out to find these people that they used to trade with, that they used to have open borders with, friendly relations. And so they didn't have a quota necessarily. They just had an idea of where these centers of civilization were. So they were going to go out there and see if those people were still there. And if they were, they were going to be, let's all come back and meet. And along the way, they ran into other people, I'm sure, especially in places like Garraby Plain, in the stretch of land between Fall Creek and the base of the mountains, in the plains south of Tide's End. They certainly ran into other people and were like, what's up? And those other people were like, we follow these gods, or we follow, and as long as they were elders, they were like, high five. Do you know of Tide's End? Oh, you do. Can you help us get there? And then they would all kind of glom together and get there. And again.
So specifically with Congarai, because I thought you said 2 podcasts ago that they went to Congarai and there was nobody there.
Right. They found it more or less empty. People that lived around there and stuff, but it wasn't a city per se. There were just a lot of people that kind of lived in the plains and around the ruins. But those people didn't remember
the place they thought they were going to find wasn't there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and they were wrong because they
mean.
had it marked as a city, and it's not. It never was. They had misunderstood what that place was.
Right. But somehow they found people in the area to represent Bast and Beth Kalor
to
attend the Synod, but
there are other villages out there.
So they just made it to the villages, but didn't go all the way to Congarai. What?
No. They made it to Congarai, but Congarai was, for lack of a better word, empty.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Congarai wasn't a city. It wasn't the cradle of a civilization like they thought it was.
Right.
And in fact, what they found instead were the Garraby tribes and the settlements that they had along the coast and on the oasis trails.
But if they encountered them, how would they then think that it was okay for them to build a city? That's what I don't understand.
There were people camped around the ruin as well that also didn't have a direct line of understanding of what the place used to be, and that's because of a particularly focused sundering of that line of knowledge that happened in the past. Right. That's all part of the whole story of the Anacofan continent. So those people lived on and around it. It's a source of water. It's a giant spring. So people would go there for water. Some people would camp out in it in various spots, but it wasn't being used for its original purpose of worship. It was being used as a shelter and as this giant ruin.
From the perspective of the people who settled it now, nobody owned it.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of sounds from your descriptions like it was more of a communal land that everybody used, but nobody, specifically claimed. And I would imagine there were, disputes over the use of it and that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
It technically still is. Like, the idea that Congarai is a city is kind of not true. It's really more like there's a bunch of people that are settled there now, and they all have, for lack of a better word, dominion over the piece that they're holding. But it's not. There isn't a government. There isn't a king or a burgher or a governor or a council. There's this block is owned by these people, and by owned we mean they live there, and I'm not going there because they kick my ass and they try.
So it's in a lot of ways it sounds like the way that Falkirk kind of formed, that instead of it being, we set the roots down here and staked out all the land and put lots and assigned people to places, made these neighborhoods, that it was, the people coming together kind of loosely establishing in an area, and then, over time those become their actual roots there.
Right. Yeah, and it was I don't want to use the word squat because that puts it down, but it was more like it was
I think squat is the appropriate term.
Sure. I mean, but the people squatting there, some of which, if you followed their bloodline all the way back, had a cultural right to squat there. It's just if they knew better, they wouldn't be living there. They would be living elsewhere, except that lifestyle is not possible because somebody messed it up. And so, yeah, it's a weird situation. Squatting feels right, but it also feels like I'm talking down, and I'm not. It was a spring, and a big one, and it had roofs that were there, places that were obviously hand wrought. So there were people living there, and so when people showed up, they were the ones that were amenable, decided, okay, we'll trade. Other people were like, hey, can I have that section over there? And they were like, nobody lives there, bro. And so they put down their roots, like you said.
That sounds like the way many oases in the deserts kind of get grown.
Yeah,
If it's got water and if it's got, decent land, and you just kind of hang there, and over time, yeah, it grows a whole little community and culture.
Right. And so that's kind of how Kongarai became the city of Kongarai, which, wasn't. Because it was like somebody found a foundation with a lot of clean water.
Yeah. It's kind of messed up that it is, but that's a different story.
Really sort of messed up that it is, but that's a story.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of one of the interesting things I've been thinking about with a lot of this is, what would lead to something being more developed and built up. Like, I imagine, Crown's Rock is its own little metropolis of sorts versus, like you're saying, with Kongarai and with Fell Creek, and I'm sure some other places, it's a lot less industrialized, a lot less, like, centrally planned and built. I guess Tide's End would probably be another one that seems like it was really, planned in the construction, but also a lot of that was just the nature of, like, what the good spots are, what the bad spots are, where you got to live to do work, where you got to live to, be above it all or whatever, depending on your status. So, it seems almost like it naturally formed, like some areas, it didn't seem like planning and that sort of stuff was the intent of it. So it built up into more neighborhoods and establishments and, areas that people specifically own versus something that is all owned by the owned by the city, and,
right, with like a works,
yeah. So there's definitely a lot of in between there, though. I'm sure it's not just like a few neighborhoods together or a big city. There's places that kind of split the difference between the two, right?
Certainly,
Baylor.
Well, even.
I mean,
even
Baylor's a big city, but it's also a city of plantations and estates, and so
so it has a little central city core,
right,
and then suburbs, for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I was struggling.
Right.
The phrasing. Yeah.
Whereas Tide's End grows sort of like a medieval city in that it's got its harbor, and then it's got layers of accretion that come out this way, so the main streets are radial rather than being a grid. Sky Pass is far more squared, planned, because you have to literally chisel out every square foot of land up there.
Is Sky Pass like the most Apollonian designs of all the cities in the game? Is it very much like somebody who likes things organized would really dig this place?
Very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Good to know.
It's definitely the most planned.
It's certainly the most planned, right? Because it didn't naturally form at all. It was completely hand hewn, from an idea.
Okay.
So
we're getting close to the 1 hour mark here. Obviously, we're going to be going much longer than that, but there were a couple of questions that came up earlier that I wanted to address while we're kind of in between things a little bit here. So, Comrade Headclot was asking, are there remnants of before the Fall Society? If so,
yep,
what form did they take?
Do you mean like actual practice remnants? Because those, yes, but those are mixed in with all of the current stuff, just as we still do strange shit like throw salt over our shoulder.
Yeah.
Or
is there anybody still
those things are
like
blended.
they did 1,500 years ago?
Yeah, but those people, I think, are far flung, are out in little pockets of. I've been farming this valley for a very long time, and the darkness came, and there were monsters sometimes, and we fought them off, and then things got better.
Yeah, well, and as a small...
Well, the Garabi are still remnants.
Certainly there are Garabi that are
What
trying...
are the names of the... the native Valyri people? The
Oh, yeah.
Mounts Rock. What is the name of those people?
I haven't named them individually. I'll just be straight. I haven't named them individually. They're there, but I haven't given them a people name.
It sounds like there's always been Tidezendians, whatever. Is there?
Right.
Do you have a better phrase for that, or is that what they are?
They're the people. Yeah, the people of Tide's End, and they are made up. Like again, all of this land is about the size of Texas. So over all this time, Tide's End is everyone has had a representative of their people go to Tide's End at some point or another.
Are they Tiders or are they Endies?
Endies or Tiders?
Probably Endies, aren't
I'm
they?
thinking Endies.
Yeah.
Enders? No.
No, they're Endies.
Yeah, I think Endies maybe. And so I have quite a few villages that are, I guess, trade stops, but trade stops generally have their roots in other sorts of villages. You know, if I'm making a path from here to there, and I know it's going to take me multiple days, and I know that I can just tweak my path a little bit, it's not going to change the amount of days it takes me to get from there to there, but I get to sleep in a bed every night. I'm going to go that way, and so that's how the trade
you'll
routes are going
architect
to
your
go.
road that way, yeah.
And with the map that I've been doing of Greyshore, there are maybe 12 or 15 of these villages, and I've been naming them and assigning kind of their histories, which is taking forever. It's very deep, but in that is where I end up naming the native people that used to live outside of Valor. They will be incorporated into one of those places. That's where I'll end up writing out what their names are and that sort of thing. I have their clothing style and their lifestyle kind of figured out, but not their actual names yet. And names, by the way, those are the questions I'm going to dodge. Or the name, what's the name of the guy whose idea it was to have this? You know, I don't know because I didn't write Bob whose idea it was. It's an individual story yet, because to me it's more important. The events are more important than the individual name of the dude, which is why I hadn't focused there yet.
The event can be described in a couple of paragraphs in a document, whereas the history is a story.
It's a whole tale.
Write it.
Further, my focus on particular details was driven in the beginning, especially by my need to create content for that particular location, to give an artist something to build, that kind of thing. Whereas now I can be way more sort of holistic about it and write.
Yeah. It's actually kind of, sad isn't the right word. It's unfortunate, though, that, like, when we started working on what would become Revival, before we had an art team, we were sort of free to build whatever piece of the world we wanted.
Sure.
And so, for example, if you could survive the trip, and that's a big if, and you sailed south and west from the mountains behind Fall Creek, right?
Yes, south and west, yes.
And you sailed south and west far enough, you would come across a desert archipelago.
Yeah.
And there's a prince in that archipelago.
Correct.
And there's a whole nation there, and there's a celestial observatory there, and it's all...
We're not releasing that out for
right,
for
and
like
there's this
3 years.
There's a history of this entire place
Stop it.
that you guys will
I'm not writing
never
it.
see this year or next year
I
or the
have
year
other
after
things
that.
to write.
Right. Like, but we literally wrote those.
We wrote an expansion
4.5
because it is the
years
next
ago.
expansion.
You
and
know
we
what
needed
I
to
mean?
give
Like,
people
yeah.
timeline things they could put on their fucking waterfall.
Yep. But once we started working on the Meow and we realized the scope of the lands that we were able to get done with our resources, we were like, well, we have to put all that over there for now, and we're going to work on it here, right?
Well, especially in the Meow, we were building something that was at a scale that was really more one-to-one than any MMO you've played, like with regard to player movement through the world and like how long it took you to traverse. And
it was going to take 2 game weeks to get from Sky Pass to Tide's End.
Tide's End. That
Or,
was
to Crown's Rock.
Right,
But,
and you were supposed to have to camp in between or find trade stops to rest at or inns. And we assumed that since you weren't going to be a diaper-wearing player, I mean, some people were, but unless you were that guy on the IV with the Texas catheter, you weren't gonna play that trip in one session,
Right.
right? You were gonna have to take it in pieces, and that realization kind of forced us to focus on local these few local areas. I mean,
Right, but
now
at
we
a-
have to build a world the size of
at a
Texas
micro scale. But as a result, there are all these like weird,
by hand.
hazinesses between them.
Right.
And then off the edge of the map, there's a whole other world of adventure.
Yep.
It's a weird circumstance of the way that we've developed this world.
Yeah, that was always something I had wondered. If you sailed west off the edge of the known map, do you end up coming around the east side? And it sounds like no. This is just
Oh no,
we're basically looking at the North and South America of a world that has the entire rest of it, kind of hidden to us. And I would imagine part of that is, when you get out into the further and deeper parts of the water, the risks increase. The influence, I would imagine, of the outer gods is probably more pronounced in those areas. So even making a trek off of the kind of the two continents that we have access to, and any of the stuff in between, is going to be getting into like some serious dangerous territory that a fleet of ships can go, and all of them can end up not making it because it's just not safe or viable. Or it could be like the Bermuda Triangle, where there's those hexagonal shaped clouds that shoot down the air bombs, and just you're sunk.
Well, but and so even if it's not that the influence is there, it could be that the influence was there.
Right.
Some of the hints that I'm getting is that like the to me it seems like the history of the Garavi has been purposefully obfuscated by the elder gods as part of their punishment for being responsible due to their relationship with the Great Old Ones and destroying the area. And I would imagine that could be the place. Could be the case for other modes of travel. Again, besides just going over physical land, we've got magic. So there's, ways if you're in Aname's realm. We haven't really talked about impediments there, like I don't know, aether storms, or maybe some of the Hall of Doors are not only locked but destroyed. I don't know if maybe there are doors that have to be rebuilt if they're gonna, but there's all kinds of stuff with good reason, because they used to. Yeah, they used to.
Some of them are broken closed for very good reason.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. So, it seems like it might not be that those areas are specifically problematic right now in terms of if you go there you'll be in trouble, but they could have been closed off or lost, or the key to open those doors nobody might know what those are. So there's all kinds of stuff that could be preventing us from going south, other than just trying to go sailing around or going over physical land.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, someday we'll put those islands up, and there's a story there.
It's cool. Our original revival meow method was going to be, once the world was built and our content team moved on, we would build the next expansion. And when we built these islands, the way we were going to release them was, had you sailed off the western coast to begin with, before these islands were built, you would have storms, get turned around, maybe encounter scary things, but ultimately not get anywhere, and maybe even be consumed by the stormy ocean. Or there were boats that couldn't go that far. You would find seas too rough to travel. But then once we did put them out there, we weren't going to roll them out with, hey guys, added new content out west. We were just going to put the islands in, seed the world with a couple artifacts that maybe led people to the storyline or led people to the inkling that there might be islands out there, and then let it ride for about a month. And if nobody had discovered them yet, put an NPC in the world that was telling people, oh my God,
Yeah.
either I came from this place and was washed on the shore, or someone else discovered the artifact, and you make the NPC discover it and talk about it to get players to go. We were thinking a member of that culture or washing up on the shore would be pretty cool, but depending on who they are, your average MMO schmo sees the dude walking up the shore. The dude doesn't speak his language. Maybe he draws a sword. Maybe that poor fucker just got stabbed. And now you gotta, now as storytellers, we have to find a way to do that again.
Well, that's the other thing I was thinking about is like, well, shit, like someone who knows the Hall of Doors really well, or gets a really, really long trek into Mortality Gate, couldn't they have potentially ended up somewhere? Certainly. Even like Arctic and Antarctic, we haven't really, they haven't been depicted on the maps, but if it's any sort of like physical world or whatever that exists with any sort of, slight realism, it's got them. There's probably not much history.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've talked about this a bit.
We know where on the globe the
Gray Shore is.
The Blackwell Sound is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's,
Southern
not
hemisphere.
quite equatorial, but, right about below whatever they would call that tropic there.
Yeah.
That's, that's where it is. But that means that there's, there's world down here and world up here and all the way around the back.
And we also did some fudge math with regard to the span of our seasons, and this, sort of the space of the world and how big the thing is and where it is on. Theleston's probably pretty big.
Yeah,
it's probably a super Earth. It's bigger than Earth, and you even had its spin and its axis calculated
and its
one
orbital period, because that's the only way to justify the bizarre seasons that we have.
But we modeled this, is what I'm saying. Like, we had this mathematically modeled, and I'm gonna have to give over to Snipey, because to me it's just like Theleston's big.
Yeah,
well, and it has an eccentric orbit,
To be fair, it's not quite a super Earth. It's about 1.6 bits.
There you go.
But it's big, and it processes around its axial tilt very slowly, and it also moves around its sun in a very what's the word I'm looking for? Esoteric orbit. So it's not circular; it's elliptical, and it goes really fast when it's around about 3 times faster when it's closer to the sun than when it's further away from the sun.
Oh yeah,
good to know.
But yeah, and I don't have the image anymore, but I actually ran it through what's that called, Universe 5 or whatever. It's this astronomy program to get the seasonal progression that we wanted, and it took 3 weeks of messing around with Carl Sagan shit.
That's pretty awesome, though.
But it is a real, like, that you really could live on a world that experienced this ecosystem, this environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what it seems like has been hinted at today is that because you've talked in the past about the known world, but it seems like the followers of Brog might have records of these islands that you were just talking about. They might have records of, they know that there is an Arctic land that people are not traveling to.
They're probably not the only ones either. They're just the ones with the scientific record, for lack of a better word.
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine that there are stories in other cultures of that, but then there are probably also peoples that don't know beyond where their valley that they've lived in for the last
right. They don't have any reason to.
Yeah. They've never traveled outside of the valley, made a canoe, taken the canoe out to the ocean, put an outrigger on it, and gone island hopping down to the.
But it sounds like from what you've said today is that there are people who might know. There are people who might have explored for that. but they're not able to get there because it's not time for them to get there yet. Like you said earlier, people may have left to go search for Tongarai because they knew there was something there, but nobody ever made it back until a certain point.
Sure.
People might have known that they read in their records that there were people down in the Falkirk area, and they sent people down to go, but nobody ever came back until a specific time because, like you're saying, they're encountering storms. The forest has not opened up because the gods have decided it's not time for you to go there yet.
Absolutely.
So we talk about the known world, but it's not necessarily even the known world. It's partially the rediscovered world because
That's
they
absolutely
could know about it but not have rediscovered it yet.
That's
absolutely
totally fair. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely true. For sure.
So
and really, I mean, admittedly, some of that is just how fast
That's
can
the way it should be.
digital
No, but
assets.
but that should. I mean that feeds back into the lore. All of those limitations feed back into the lore. So that's the mechanical limitations are part of the lore. That's fine.
Well, we tried to do that though because I mean you've played MMOs and a lot of times they're just like,
Yeah.
can't
Can't
go
go
that
that
way,
way.
man. Or I mean, Anima's Realm. This piece of lore specifically came out of me being frustrated with well, I'll just die and respawn at a graveyard, or how much of this world matters if I know that I'm warrior without end, that I'm just gonna die and pop up again at the graveyard and whatever, like that takes a really important, I think, piece of character development or character understanding or interaction with your world out of the game. And so we were like, we have to have a mechanical death and respawn solution. What can we do to make this whole? And I don't like it when you can see the armature of the mechanic. Frankly, I'm a role player. I'm a story dude. I don't like it when it always affects the way you play your character when you can see the armature.
Yeah, it's the pieces of that new show, the remake of Westworld, that bother me the most are when they show up in their white suits, right? I'm like, dude, if I was out looking at the stars, I would be so fucking pissed if I watched you throw up crew lights and drag a bunch of dead robot bodies onto a fucking truck in the middle of my goddamn adventure.
Right?
Fuck you.
Right?
My life.
Don't make me see the
Screw
respawn.
that,
You
you
can
know?
do that. Just make
There
the
never
respawn
seem to
and
be
no one's in the
guests
front
around
row.
when that happens, though. It's only
They do make a point of trying to say that they care, but I feel like you wouldn't have built that system that way. It's bad design. But that's actually my point, is that when we build a world, we try to build it with the experience that we want to get across in mind, and that includes its limitations. And so a lot of our world design was really built around the limitations that we had with the format of a Meow, right? Because, while a Meow gave us way more freedom than a traditional MMO, I was about to say AAA, it's funny, than a traditional MMO, it still doesn't give you a ton of freedom. Any computer software is constrained, and so we had to figure out cool ways to get around that.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up Westworld, too, because as I've said it more than one time. I said it before they announced that they were rebuilding it. And by the way, the fact that they're rebooting fucking Westworld just proves my point. There is a market for this.
Yeah, the Meow's time is gone.
It's what I want to build. I want to build that. I want to build a place you go because it's a cooler world than this, or a more interesting one, or whatever. And you just go there to be you there. You're not dinging. You're not following some fucking checklist for success. It's not race up the top of the goddamn checklist. It's what would you do if you wanted to be a thiefy guy or a fisherman or an explorer, which is what I really am, which is why the game's actually about explore and uncover the lost history, because that's what I wanted to do.
But that's fun. And there's room for all kinds of players in that motif.
No one else is going to make it for me. I'll make it so that you guys can all see what I've been going on about. And I'll dungeon master you.
Works for me. I'm in.
I want to be your dungeon master. I want to be your Anthony Perkins. Sir Anthony Perkins.
That guy's creepy in that shit.
Fucking
Anyway.
Let's
so many parallels. So many parallels.
Paul is asking if we're going to take an intermission. Let's take a break at 2:30. Well, I mean at the 30-minute mark that's coming up. 8 minutes from now?
Sure.
Let's take a little break and come back, because I think it's going to be longer than 2 hours. But yeah, Paul, did you have questions? It seems like you've been pretty quiet.
I did have some questions. Neuro, which one were you going to ask?
I can see your little question list over
Well, I had like half a dozen questions, but one I posted in the chat was, would the devotees of an elder god be able to sense that their god is getting stronger as the Og and the Gu fade out?
I think it depends on the elder god, and it depends on how devoted you were, whether or not you were, in regular communion with your god. But I think that at the high ends, yes, like the most devoted of Hylety probably noticed when the briars thinned around Fall Creek. You know,
I was going to say some gods are more subtle than others, but I imagine there are a couple of gods out there that would kind of, hit you over the head with it.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, and it depends.
So,
If
I mean,
you're the
how
five-
would the monks,
You'd
priests,
walk out in
monks,
the
I guess, of Brog
first time
determine it, since they don't do magic?
That was awesome. Well, wait. What was that? That was interesting.
How would the monks of Brog determine that, since they don't do magic?
Right. They did it by instance of, like, I actually know this, by looking at the stars and instance of weird ass stuff being reported or being found. So again,
Okay.
no one has seen Dagon himself in 50 years, and his constellation hasn't risen in the last 20, 25, maybe now, or the sky is clear of all of the indications that a great old one is near.
Yeah.
So
For the first time
for
in
the
generations,
first time in
the
generations,
eye
the eye
of
of
Azathoth is
Az-
not in the sky.
exactly,
that
that sort of thing. So a combination of their astrology and their reports from beyond. And then for the people of Fall Creek, again, it would be more like the orchard has given fruit for the first time in decades, or the briars around our homes
I
have
see.
thinned.
Okay.
you know?
That's kind of cool. I like that. I like that it's so organic.
Yeah, I was going to say, it
For
seems
those-
like astrology is one of the big tells. I mean, that's not just has to do with the influence of the great old ones or whether they're close by or not. It's just when the constellations are in the sky, you'll notice that their
Wouldn't
power
that be
is
astronomy?
greater. It's astronomy and astrology, I think, combined. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a fuzzy line here in our world.
Yeah.
Some things are going to be expected because of the natural seasonal expectation. The rose of summer versus the hammer of winter is going to be the normal thing that's expected throughout the general seasons, irregardless of whether there's a great old one or outer god involved. But then, if there's trouble, if there's a fallow, I guess, during the rose of summer, then that's problematic too.
Certainly, yeah. Well, and that would be a indication that something wrong was happening.
Something was terribly
and-
wrong. Yeah.
Interesting.
No fish in the lake.
Yeah. Likewise, if winter doesn't come, that would be a pretty big sign that something was wrong.
That'd be real bad.
Yeah.
Real bad. And those sorts of things were probably things that were experienced in the dark times, and stuff happened, and either they were fixed or they fixed themselves, whatever that means. And fixed yourself could be as much as this thing sleeps for 100 years every now and then, and it's asleep right now, so the lake's fine and nobody notices that it's there. But when it comes back, then people will have to remember this happened before at this time, and what did we do, or that sort of thing. And again, that's
And there's a lot of that
what the content was
sort
made
of
of. That was
sleeping
all
in the
stories.
world. A whole lot of hey, this thing happens every X, and somebody's got to do this thing.
Yep. And now it's time.
Yeah.
So we're just going to turn it on until somebody figures it out and does it, and it's going to grow and become worse or whatever.
That was one of the ways that we were going to introduce particular monsters into the world was they would start as very small, seemingly innocuous problems. You know, oh, there are more wolves in the forest than there used to be. Be careful.
Yeah.
But it would turn out that they really weren't wolves at all, and if you left them to feed long enough, they would become something else.
Yeah, exactly. The Wolf Lord or some other thing, right? Something from the past.
Right,
And it
exactly.
would grow in power until it was undeniable that
Yeah.
there was a problem, and then players would be
Yeah, and then-
moved to do something.
And then
about it.
villages get eaten by wolf-like monsters.
Right.
Okay, yeah. I like it.
Yeah, and the cool thing is if you were up on your lore, or if you were in the right place at the right time and just happened to make the right choice, you could diffuse that and it would just never happen.
Well, yeah, and those that were real lore hounds that were just over every scrap would have this whole sort of apophenia going on where they'd be like, wolves, that's
Yep.
Wolf Lord. I know
Exactly.
something about a Wolf Lord.
Exactly.
Hold on, I know something, right?
Exactly.
And
And I saw a crow yesterday where there aren't any crows, so
yeah, so maybe that's this, and maybe 3 out of 5 of the signs they saw were complete.
yeah, not real at all.
Yeah, just false pattern linking. But the one was good, or maybe they were all right, and maybe they were just like, oh, Wolf Lord, hold on, where's that? Oh yeah, fixed.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
that's the guy you want around because he's the dude who knows the stuff.
Right,
And
yeah.
then we, as storytellers, have that experience like in Westworld where the dude comes in, starts doing his
His
speech,
awesome speech, yeah.
and newbie nearby goes, huh, and puts him down, and the storyteller goes,
Yep. Never hear that speech.
One of my favorite
Yep.
scenes of the first episode.
that was great.
Yeah.
That was so funny. And I've had that experience happen as a storyteller, but it's kind of what I want to happen because then I've said it before. The game, it's about the players.
Right.
It's
At
about
that
your
point,
story.
the story's happening.
Right.
Not your narrative or whatever. The story is
Yeah,
happening.
I am not that GM. This is not my great arc. This is your great arc. I'm here to facilitate it.
That's actually the
Right,
whole
and in
point.
that sense, then the players will make the content based on their choices.
Correct.
Right, which means that
Or
you have
lack
as much
of choices.
investment.
Right.
Oh,
absolutely.
that village got eaten by monster-like wolf things.
Yep.
And that'll be
Oops, maybe
true.
next time we should actually help the next village.
Exactly.
Right. Or maybe
exactly.
you don't even care because you're a nihilist and you were like, ha ha ha.
Yeah, those guys threw me out of town last week anyway.
Exactly.
But yeah, and the cool thing is that's going to happen in the pen and paper game too. Right?
Sure.
Like that's
Storytellers
Or-
only get more flexible.
right. That's core Theleston
With the
rather
tabletop.
than core Meow. Or
Okay, well, it's 3:30, so let's go ahead and take our intermission so that Zero can do his techno magic. We'll be back
5
in
minutes,
5
10 minutes?
Yeah,
5. Okay. All right.
And I'll just put up this thing and that thing, and I'll clear the audio for a moment here for you guys.